Welcome back. Hope you've been refreshed. I noticed that 14 of the 15 packages we have on Common Core were picked up. That's encouraging. Thank you very much. And at least half the pile of expectation of privacy were picked up. So I'm glad that's happening. Our next speaker for this afternoon is making his return visit to Ramona T. May I have your attention, please? Thank you. Our next speaker is making his second visit to Ramona T. He was here in the spring, where he provided an expert's view of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which was referred to a couple of times this afternoon. Those who were here for the last one probably didn't have any questions, right? Our speaker was born in the Belgian Congo. Ooh. To French and Italian parents who eventually went back to Europe, where JJ was raised in Switzerland, earned a degree in international law, and went to work for the International Committee of the Red Cross, where he became known worldwide, for those people in the know, as the expert on the Geneva Convention. After spending a career with that organization, he came down here to San Diego, where he founded and became the executive director of an organization called TEAM, TEAM, which stands for Training and Education About the Middle East. He's our own regional expert on events in the Middle East. Please welcome back to Ramona T, JJ SURBECK.
Thank you very much, Jim. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. How many of you were at my presentation on the Israeli-Middle East conflict? Oh, about half. So, okay. Because I hate to repeat myself, especially if people have already heard it, but I see that about half were not. So I will mention a few things in relation to the general situation. Before I start, however, I want to make a few comments. Number one, I want to mention my friend Michael Hayutin, who you heard before, who's having this event on 9/11 in Carlsbad, and I would highly recommend if he can make it. I know it's pretty far from here, but he's an excellent speaker, and he has one quality that all of us need in this big battle that we're involved in. So does Gary. You have to be fearless. It's absolutely indispensable. You have to be fearless and not be intimidated by people who make a living intimidating others. So that's the first requirement. Michael has it, Gary has it, I have it. Actually, I kind of enjoy facing these guys and really responding intimidation with intimidation and demolishing their arguments. So, which leads me to the next point, which was the question that you asked, sir. How do we counter this? Well, you have to understand, and I'm going to give you a presentation that goes back to Islam because it's really important to understand where these people come from, not so much physically as ideologically and psychologically. We really need to understand what they are in order to be able to fight them, because as long as we fall into the trap of thinking that they are like us, we're lost. We have to understand that they have a completely different mindset. They don't play by the same rules at all. And we need to understand where the traps are. So to answer your question, my answer is knowledge. You have to know what you're dealing with. You have to know who the enemy is. You have to be able to name the enemy. And you have to be willing to confront the enemy. That is as simple as possible, as can be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about several things that Gary talked about. I did want to mention Gary Fowles, by the way. It was the first time I met him. Although I have been in contact with him for many months by email. We've been doing a lot of work together because the situation that he described at UCI is very similar to the situation that we're facing at UCSD in San Diego. Same problems, same issues. Same cowardice on the part of the administration. Same refusal of Hillel to be engaged into that battle because they'd much rather keep their situation on campus quiet. They told me that. So you're not going to be able to work with these type of institutions. It's left to us, community members and students. We have to work with the students directly to understand what they're dealing with. What I'm going to talk about today, as you can see, the title of the presentation is Free Speech in Danger. That's what we're dealing with today. What we take for granted in this country, to debate anything, to argue about anything, to make fun of anything, is in jeopardy. The Muslims, and I'll explain the difference between Islamism and Islam. But let's say the radical Muslim make it a rule that they want to impose on us that you cannot criticize or mock anything that has to do with Islam. So they want to impose on us a code that comes straight back from the 7th century, impose it on our way of living here today. If we let them, it's going to happen. And we have no reason to let them, because it really would be a tremendous, tremendous loss for this country, for all of us. I don't think we'll get there, but we're going to have to fight to keep our freedoms and especially our freedom to speech and voice our opinions. Whether people like them or not, that's what America is all about. So, let's start. Let's start with the guy who's at the center of all this. The reason I like to mention, to say a few words about Muhammad the Prophet is because I don't know if, I should mention the fact that I realize that you've had other lectures on Islam, so forgive me if I'm saying things that you've already heard before. I don't really know what you've heard, so I will stick to the basics, but maybe, a little overlap never hurts. And I'm going to mention a number of titles and concepts, so you may want to write notes in case you would like to pursue this information, because this is really what I recommend every one of you do. Every one of you can be involved in this battle, but you have to have the knowledge in order to be able to be effective. So let's talk about Muhammad. Why? Because it's really important to understand that for all these Islamic activists, Muhammad is the center of their universe. He is the model on which they must base their own lives. Whatever Muhammad did, because he was allegedly selected by God to bring us the truth of God, Muhammad is perfect. He's the perfect man. Well, when you read the life of Muhammad, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to realize that he was very far from perfect. He could be called a lot worse words, like a scoundrel, a con artist of a first order. You can name it whatever you want. You read his life and you go, wait a minute, this is the perfect man? I don't think so. We should be able to say that. There's no reason why anyone should intimidate us into not saying this kind of thing if that's what you think. He's not my prophet. He's not your prophet. It's their prophet. Good. They can have it. But they don't have any right to impose him on me. So it is really important to understand that Muhammad, the centrality of Muhammad for every Muslim, at least the hardcore Muslims. Next, please. You will hear people, especially with the dialogue groups and so forth, compare Muhammad to Jesus and Buddha. Excuse me? Jesus and Buddha have never approved violence. Muhammad built his empire entirely on violence. So these type of comparisons don't have any value whatsoever. Next. So was he a spiritual or political leader? Well, you need to know this about him. The first 13 years of his career as a prophet were in Mecca, and he was just preaching. And everybody was making fun of him and was telling him, oh, leave us alone, you're a nutcase, we don't want to hear about you. And in 13 years, he managed to get only 150 converts. Then he moved to Medina, because actually the people of Mecca got so sick of him, they chased him out. He went to Medina, which is north of Mecca, and he became a political leader. And that's when he realized where his career plan was. Because when he became a political and military leader, boom, in 10 years, he had conquered the entire Arab Peninsula. So he went on from there to become strictly a political leader, masquerading as a religious leader. It's very important to understand that. Jesus didn't have that kind of story. Buddha didn't have that kind of story. Only Muhammad did. This is a very important point also to understand the psychology of Islamist radicals. They are deeply convinced, totally convinced, that God, Allah, decided to send Muhammad as the last prophet to give the last revelation to mankind. Because in their view, in his views, the humanity had failed twice. The Jews had, quote unquote, distorted the message that God had given them. And then the Christians later had also corrupted the message, allegedly, that God had given them. So God, Allah, decided to send a third prophet. And that was the last one. So when you have that kind of mindset, you are raised to feel an intense sense of superiority. You look down on everybody else. You are the people chosen by Allah to impose Allah's will on the whole world. And that's why they are absolutely shameless about it. They don't even think that, they don't understand that we object to that. They think they have been designated by God to conquer the world and impose the Muslim rule. That's where this is coming from. Oops. Oh, here we go. Very quickly, are you all clear on the division between Sunnis and Shiites? Okay. It all stems from a succession quarrel. I like to make fun of a lot of things and a lot of people. One thing that I find really kind of laughable is that Allah, in all his wisdom, never planned a succession plan for Muhammad. Okay? What kind of CEO is that? You have to plan a succession plan for your prophet. Never thought of it. Muhammad never talked about it. So when he died, because eventually he did die, there was a huge battle between different factions among the Muslims. And you had one branch that said, the Shiites maintain that only family-connected leaders, you had to have a link to Muhammad one way or another, a direct family, blood-related link in order to be able to claim to become the caliph, the commander of all the Muslims. And the other side, the Sunnis, said, no, we do it the traditional Arab way, which is some sort of form of democracy, if you want, but the most effective one among, the most competent one among us as leader is going to be chosen by his peers, and he will be the caliph. Well, they went to war over this for a long time, and they're still killing each other over this. Every day today, Muslims are always complaining that the West is killing Muslims. Excuse me, the number of Muslims killed by other Muslims is 10 times higher. So today, yesterday, there was a bomb in Iraq that killed 80 people. It was by Sunnis apparently killing Shiites, or the other way around. This has been going on for 1,400 years. And the thing that is really insane is that they're not equal in the sense of numbers. The people who won that battle early on, after Muhammad's death, were the Sunnis. The Sunnis became the majority. They won the battle. And the Shiites have been kind of complaining ever since that they were pushed aside. And they have slightly different beliefs on a number of issues, but by and large, as far as we're concerned, they're all on our enemies, especially the Islamists. So let's look at the map very quickly, because I want to show you how this translates. Sunnis. The deep green pockets here are the Shiites. The Shiites are the minority. They represent about 10 to 15% of the entire Muslim world. So they always been persecuted by the Sunnis. And they're primarily, as you can see, in Iran, a good chunk in Iraq, an important pocket in Syria and Lebanon, and here in Yemen. This is Iraq, this is Iran. These are the Kurds, which is a different branch of Islam altogether. They're kind of very, very interesting people, and they're playing an increasing role in the current situation. The Kurds were completely forgotten after World War I when the Middle East was completely redesigned by the colonial powers, but they have wanted their country ever since. And mind you, the Palestinians have been claiming that they have, I'll slip a little bit into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict here. Palestinians are claiming that they've had a country forever, that Palestine has always existed. Absolute lie. That is not the case at all. There never was a Palestinian people as such. They were only part of Syria and Jordan to a certain extent. The Kurds, on the other hand, which incidentally number anywhere from 35 to 40 million people, which is more than Palestine 4 million, they don't have a country. So if there is one people that really deserve the country today, it is the Kurds, long before the Palestinians even talk about it. But that's an aside. Let's move on to the next one. This is the Muslim world today. As you can see, it's primarily here, and the whole Sahel, northern, southern Sahara desert, with different intensity in Ethiopia and different countries. 1.2 billion, as Gary was mentioning, out of what, 6.5 or 7 billion people on the planet today. That gives you an idea of how large a group it is. However, the people who cause a problem, I totally agree with Gary when he mentioned that the majority, of course, are just people like you and me that want to live a normal life. They don't want to impose Islam on the others, even though it's a religious duty. That's about different academics have tried to figure out, well, what's the percentage? How many of these 1.2 billion are the crazies, the people that really want to impose Islamic law on us? About 10%. Well, you do the numbers. 10% of 1.2 billion, what is that? 120 million people, which is, what, a third, a little bit over a third of the population of the United States. So we can't just dismiss that as a minor problem. It's a big problem. 120 million crazies is a big problem. And we should pay attention. So, very quickly on the Quran, because, you know, again, another thing that Muslims won't let you do is say anything bad about the Quran. I don't want to say anything bad. I'm just making my comments because, like you, sir, I have looked at it. I have read good chunks of it as much as I could because it's really boring. But it's basically divided into 114 surah, and they contain verses. So you have about 600 verses, which are all considered revelations to Muhammad directly by God via the archangel Gabriel. How Gabriel got involved in this story, I have no clue. But it is kind of odd that he would pick Gabriel, or Gabriel would pick Muhammad. What is really bizarre when you try to read it, there's no logical structure to it. It is very disconcerting. It's just a bunch of quotes, a bunch of stories. There's no logical structure, a chronological order. It is weird. I find it very difficult to read. But here's something more interesting, especially when you talk to Muslims. They will quote you text from different sources. And you always assume, unless you can really corner them on it, you always assume that they're quoting the Quran, which you can't argue with because it's the word of God. Well, actually, the whole body of text and quotes that Muslims use is made of 3 sources. And they don't always tell you that. One is the Quran, but look, it's only 14% of that body. It's called the trilogy because there are 3 instruments. The second one is the Hadith. Hadith are commentaries that have been added over the centuries that comment on different episodes in the life of Muhammad. Well, look at that. The Hadith is like 60%. And then you have the Sirah, which is more comments or more historical stories about the life of the prophet. And that's 26%. So you find a lot of quote in these other texts that actually are fairly offensive. And Muslims tell you, but it's in the Quran. And in fact, if you look down, you really tell them, well, where in the Quran? Tell me which verse is it? They will tell you, oh, it's in the Hadith. Well, that's very different because the Hadith is not considered as the Word of God. Therefore, it doesn't have the same imperative character because only the Quran is the Word of God. Next, please. So here are some of the problems that we have with the Quran. And we should be able to talk about this with Muslims without them getting all huffy and puffy and, as they like to say, offended. Okay, here's the surah. God made men superior to women. Well, if that's your opinion, fine by me, but I have a different opinion. I tend to think that they're 50-50. We are equal. So that's my belief. I don't care for that belief. A woman is a field to be cultivated. I don't need to make any comment on that one. You figure it out. A woman testimony is worth half that of a man. That would fly very well in our judicial system. A man may have 4 wives and a woman only 1 husband. Oh, that's really fair. Nice. A male's inheritance must be twice that of a female. I'm glad I'm not a Muslim because my sister would have a word with me over this one. And this is a really awful one. Disobedient wives, meaning they don't do what their husband tell them to do, can be beaten. And I have another presentation on Islam, and I have a clip that I usually show where you see an imam explaining exactly how you need to beat your wife. It tells you very, very precisely, technically, make sure you don't leave any traces. Make sure you don't hit the face. But she has to understand that she must be an obedient wife. Nice. Now, there is another aspect, which is relationship with the infidels. That's you and me, folks. We're all infidels. We're unbelievers because we don't subscribe to Islam. So it depends which Muslim you're talking to, but it really depends on their numbers. In communities where you have small numbers of Muslims, and that has been pretty much the story of Muslims in America forever until today, they don't create trouble. They understand the American way of life, which is you live according to the rules of the country where you're in, which is what we all do. When they start getting large numbers, they feel stronger and they start making all sorts of demands, and I'll give you some of the examples of what's going on. It's unbelievable. So it really depends. But here is, you have all sorts of quotes, as I said, depending where you look in the Quran or in the Hadith, you have quotes that can support anything. Some of them will say, oh, there is no compulsion in religion. That one is quote over and over ad nauseam. But then you have another one that says, oh, no, slay the infidels. Can you make up your mind? I'd like to know where you're going with this. It's not permitted to lie to steal from and kill fellow Muslims, but it's okay to do so with infidels. And this is something important that we also need to understand with Muslim activists. They will tell you anything you want to hear. They will lie through their teeth. They don't have a problem with it. They don't have a moral problem with it at all. And because they feel that they can do that, it's sanctioned in the Quran. It's called, it even has a word. It's called taqiyya. You pronounce it taqiyya. I don't know which one is the correct one, but taqiyya basically sanctions lying on the part of Muslims to non-Muslims. Right. You hear a lot about the Arabs being, you did mention the fact that they will protect the Christians and the Jews when they come into power, as they have done in the past. What they don't tell you is that you will be a second-class citizen. and you will have to pay a tax called the jizya, which is about 50% of your earnings. And then you will be protected. Isn't that the definition of a racket? Yeah. Okay. So now we're getting to the heart of the subject that we're talking about here. Fundamentalism in Islam has always been there, but you have to understand what they want. It has resurfaces over the centuries, and I'll mention a few names in a few minutes, of new prophets or new speakers, spokespeople who have advocated this, a return to Islamic purity. Because sometimes I really feel sorry for Muslims because they're caught between a religion that does not allow questioning anything, and they have to live in a modern world. So they're really between a rock and a hard place. And one solution that unfortunately, an important chunk of Muslim population has decided is the right way to do it is, well, we didn't have these problems in the 7th century, so the solution is obvious. We need to go back to the Quran and apply it to today's world, and all our problems will be solved. How they can come up with that kind of concept is beyond me, but that's where they are. And they want to impose that on us. So Islamic purity is going to solve all the problems. They want a resurrection of the caliphates, which means one leader for the entire world community of the Muslims, which was abrogated by the Turks when the Turkish Ottoman Empire was defeated in 1917. The last caliph, which was in Turkey, was abrogated and by Kemal Atatürk, the founder of Turkey. And to this day, Muslims in other countries have not forgiven the Turks for abrogating the caliphate. So they want it back, and they are picking up the old struggle, which has been there for 1,400 years, of conquering the world and imposing Islam on the whole world. So here are some of these fundamentalists, and we're getting now closer to the heart of the issue. In the 13th century, the very first prophet who said we have to go back to the purity of Islam was Ibn Taymiyyah. But then we have something you all have heard about, the Wahhabi Islam in Saudi Arabia. That's where it comes from. This guy in the 18th century, Muhammad al-Wahhab, is the one who wrote that, the same story. We need to go back to the purity of early Islam and enforce in absolutely pure form of Sharia law of the Quran. Then, here we're getting into what relates to us directly. We had Hassan al-Banna, who was a philosopher, as you might call it, in Egypt. He wrote the same thing. We need to go back to Islam. That's the only way we Muslims will regain our pride and control of our lives. And they had a point there to a degree because they had been under colonial rule for a long time under the British. So I can understand where they came from. But the solution they chose is not really the right one. And ironically, look at what is going on in Egypt today. It is fascinating to watch a majority of the Egyptian population, Muslims, defeating the Muslim Brotherhood. This guy is the guy who founded the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928. And the Muslim Brotherhood phenomenon, which gained so much credence all over the Middle East and was very much fought by the governments of those countries for a long time, including in particular Nasser in Egypt. It is fascinating that they came to power and after 1 year in their position were defeated basically by the Egyptian people. We didn't have to do anything, which tells you a really important point about how pointless their philosophy and how inadequate their philosophy is. What they tried to do for the whole year that they were in power was not to take care of the economy of the country, was not to feed the people, was not to improve the situation of the Egyptian people. They entirely focused on imposing Sharia law. The Sharia law that, the law, the body of law that comes from the Quran, that's all they wanted. And the result is that the country was going into the toilet. And before it completely disintegrated, the Egyptian people said, enough. And I find it absolutely amazing. This is really a historic phenomenon that we haven't seen since the beginning of Islam, where you have Muslims revolting against the Muslim Brotherhood. And it gives me a lot of hope, because it really shows that the Muslim Brotherhood philosophy is as pointless, corrupt, and useless as communism ideology. Both of them, they're very, very similar in many ways, by the way. But you will see them fail for the exact same reasons. So then we had Hassan al-Banna. Incidentally, he was gunned down by the agents from Nasser, because he got crossed with Nasser, and he ended up not too well. This other guy picked up and started writing a number of books. He spent a lot of time in jail too, and he became the ideological father of the Muslim Brotherhood. He wrote a lot of books, led the Muslim Brotherhood for a while, and finally he really annoyed Nasser so much that he ended up being hanged. He didn't end up too well either. I want to mention this guy, and I'll show you a picture in a minute, because very interesting story. Jim told you I was born in the Congo, which allows me to quip that I'm an African American. A real one, except for a minor detail. But on the other hand, I was raised in Switzerland, in Geneva in particular, and when this guy was gunned down in 1949, his son fled, not a bad idea, from Egypt, and was welcomed as a refugee by these consummate idiots, the Swiss, who accepted him as a refugee. He gave birth then to his own son, who is Tariq Ramadan, who was therefore born in Geneva, is a Swiss national, and is now the slickest, most clever, and most dangerous advocate of the Muslim Brotherhood you have on the planet. Because he's very, very good. He's tri-4-lingual. I mean, he completely mastered 4 or 5 languages. And he's very good at presenting the Islamic ideology as something that is not threatening to Western values. And you have, I don't know how many intellectuals or pseudo-intellectuals who buy it. A lot of Europeans haven't figured it out yet. Very dangerous guy. So here is a granddaddy, and here's the grandson. Very, very smart guy. All these names that I'm giving you, go on YouTube and check out the videos. I mean, YouTube is an amazing gold mine of information. You will find a lot of very good information, including in particular about Tariq Ramadan. Can we go back one? I think we skipped one. Oh, no. Okay, go ahead. That's fine. Right. So this is important to understand. This is their philosophy. It is the nature of Islam to dominate, not to be dominated, to impose its laws on all nations and extend its power to the entire planet. Get it? Do you need anything more clear? This is a domineering ideology. This is a fascist ideology. They want to impose their values and their will on us. Whether we like it or not is irrelevant. That's the definition of a fascist regime. Okay, now we have the other guy who ended up hanged, Said Qutb, and that's what he looked like. Some of the other pictures of him are really scary because he loved to wear this little mustache. And frankly, you look at the pictures and you go, wait a minute, this is the twin brother of this other guy. It's scary. Anyway, in 1963, and here I'm joining what Gary was telling you, the Muslim Brotherhood helps establish the Muslim Student Association here in in America. Now they are in hundreds of colleges. How many of you know how many colleges there are in this country? Any guess? Very close. Over 5,000. Yes, sir. Over 5,000 colleges between the US and Canada. In about 500 of them, these guys are there. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid. They go to the creme de la creme, the Ivy League, all the colleges where our students, our future leaders, are being trained. And you have people there who have no clue what is going on. They listen to these guys, and they come out of there hating Israel and thinking that Islam is a very nice religion. We have to pay attention. So, we're talking about a minority. 10%, 120 million altogether. Where are all the others? We talk about the moderates. And this is a bone of contention with a lot of people who disagree with even the notion of moderates. If you read the Quran and you read the tenets of Sharia law, it's impossible to be a moderate if you're a good Muslim that goes by these rules. If you're a Muslim light, as I like to call it, which is what we have luckily in majority in this country, you basically are accepting the fact that you're not a pure Muslim. You know, and there are Christian lights, there are Jews light that apply their religion in a very moderate way, and they don't go to services, and you have that with the Muslims too, a lot of them. And in a sense, it's good. But the problem is, where are they when we have this type of debates? Where are they when we have this type of issues? Where are they when there are controversies? When you have Islamists that are making the kind of statements that you saw on at UC Irvine, this crazed Malik. You don't see them anywhere. You don't hear them. There are only a few, and I'll point them out to you in a minute. So we have to figure out, where are they? Who are they? What are their numbers? Do we know? I want to believe that they're still a majority, and we have to reach out to them, but they're scared, and you understand why. Because they're under threat themselves, more so even than we are, from the crazies. And do they have a choice between extremists or apostasy? Apostasy means leaving Islam altogether. I've had it, guys. Thank you very much. I'm going to convert to Christianity, or I'm going to become an atheist. I don't want to have anything to do with Islam. Well, under the Quran, you have a number on your head, and you should be killed. Nice. So let's look at a few of those. There are basically two schools of moderates, and that's among the very, very few who are willing to come forward and talk to you and state that they disagree with the Islamists, with the crazies. One is the reformists. The reformists are just laughed at by the radicals, because the radicals' answer to any attempt to reform is, can't do it, can't touch the Quran, can't touch one syllable. The Quran is entirely, even though it's full of contradictions and incoherent in many ways, you can't touch it. So there is no way you can reform Islam according to the radicals. Well, there are a lot of young Muslims in this, they're all in the West incidentally, not so much in the Arab world, although, as I said, I see a lot of hope in what happened in Egypt. And I think there are a number of young Muslims who are starting to give a second look to Islam themselves. They realize that this can't go on. The Muslim Brotherhood can't be left alone to take power again, which is why the military, incidentally, is clamping down on them so hard, because they know they have to really crush them, otherwise they will come back. So, two good examples. Zuhdi Jasser, he's a doctor in Phoenix, and you see him on TV all the time. Look at YouTube, his name, and you will see all sorts of interviews. He has a website. He's he's interviewed by almost everybody. He's a good guy. He really is a good guy, but he's very, very limited. He's had death threats on his name ever since he started. I wish there were more like him. He says he has a lot of followers, but who knows how many there are. This one is another interesting one. I met her personally. Irshad Manji. She's a Canadian from Pakistani parents. And on top of it, she's a lesbian, which doesn't really help her case with Muslims. But she wrote two very interesting books. And this one in particular, the first one made a big splash when she first wrote it. And she still believes that there is enough to save in Islam and turn it into a peaceful religion. So you have that branch. Now let's look at the other one. The other one are saying, listen, been there, done that, been educated. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, if you can read Infidel, there is a gory scene in their chapter where she describes how she was, she had to submit to, how is it called? Genital mutilation, which is so prevalent in the Muslim world. It is absolutely, and it's not even asked for in the Quran. It developed over the centuries as a rite of passage. Every little girl has, excuse me for the technical description, but her labia, outside labia, cut, sliced, because they do not want women to have any type of pleasure during sex. That's only for men. Sick. Excuse me? Sick. So, she wrote a book which is Infidel and Nomad. I think they're pretty much similar actually, but Infidel I really highly recommend, and I highly recommend that you look her up on YouTube and watch her interviews. She is phenomenal. I think she is the most intelligent person I have ever seen on TV. She has a talent for turning around the arguments that are thrown at her by liberal idiots like I have never seen. She is remarkable. I'm a big, big fan of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And she says, forget about it. You can't reform this sectarian system. I'm walking away from it. And of course, she has to have 24/7 security with her because she's marked for death. The other one, Wafa Sultan, who is, I believe, in LA or not far from here, was a Syrian. She's a Syrian psychologist. And her big revelation came when she was in college in Homs, I believe, which is now have completely destroyed because of the Civil War. That was before the Civil War. And she was having a class, and her professor were, giving a class. And all of a sudden, a guy from the Muslim Brotherhood, the Syrian Brotherhood, barges into the class and guns down the professor in front of all the students. And that was a little bit of a shock for her. And it caused her to ask herself a lot of questions. Then she moved to America, and she became an absolute rabid critic of Islam, also marked for death. And she wrote an interesting book called A God Who Hates, which pretty much describes what the problem is. Okay, so now, here's something that I want to give you as a useful tool. When you're dealing with a Muslim who claims to be a moderate, ask him these questions and see what happens. Are you willing to accept criticism of and debate about Muhammad? Are you willing to accept revisions of the Quran? Are you willing to renounce the concept of world conquest? Are you willing to accept the division between church or mosque and state? Are you willing to renounce the imposition of Sharia law? And are you willing to respect the will of Muslims who wish to leave Islam and not call them apostates, just leave them alone? The answer that we want to each one of these questions is yes. And if they don't, then you know that you're not dealing, there are only two things. You're not dealing with a real moderate, or you're dealing with a moderate that says yes, but is using taqiyya. He's lying to you. So the thing to do is, if you can, get them and document it. Tape it, whatever their statements are, get them to ask these questions in public and see what they answer. They will dance around the issue, but that will show the people that they're not honest. And I think it's really, really important to show that to people, because most Americans really still don't believe that they are being double-crossed that much, to that extent. It's really important to do that. If you let me finish, and I'll be happy to answer your question. So now, just a few examples of what is going on today, has been going on for a number of years in this country. All sorts of little incidents, and I want to call on each one of you to pay attention what happens around yourself, in your community. Anytime you have a request from a Muslim group asking for a special treatment, stand up and say, no, no other group has ever had that kind of preferential treatment. There is no reason. They will call you bigots, they will call you racist, they will call you Islamophobes. So what? You don't care. We're in America, we have the right to express our opinion, including that we don't want that kind of stuff. So here are a few examples. These are all true stories. Muslim cabbies refused to transport customers carrying alcohol. The same Muslim cabbies, all of them from Somalia, refused to carry a woman who had a service dog, because dogs have been declared impure by Muhammad. And the way they treat dogs, by the way, is just disgusting. They consider them impure, therefore they can mistreat them. School cafeterias are asked to eliminate pork from the menu. All over the place. I mean, what are we doing? It is unacceptable. Why are they imposing their mode of living, their code on us? We have no reason to accept that. If they don't like it, they go to another cafeteria or they bring their own food. There's no reason why everybody else should adjust to their particular brand of food code. Walmart Muslims cashiers refuse to serve customers who buy pork. Hello? And Walmart, I don't know what the end of the story was, but I could not believe this, so I followed it. I thought, I would have said, tough luck, dude, you're out. Fire. No, they put him in another place. That's not the way to do it. San Diego school here carved out 15 minutes of school time for Muslim students to pray. Yeah, they are. That did not last very long. There was such an outcry, thank God, within 2 days, I think they canceled it. But the fact that it happened, the very fact that it happened in the first place is unthinkable. So we have to be very, very careful. Oh, you probably heard about this incredible story. The 6 imams who were really going into a major provocative action, I forgot which airport, demand the right to pray publicly in the airport. Can you imagine? We go to Lindbergh Airport, and you go into the terminal, and you have 6 blokes that, excuse me, I have to do my prayers. Could you move aside? I've spread my carpet because I'm going to do my prayers. I said, dude, where are you? You go to your mosque if you want to do that. This is a public space. You don't do it. Well, of course, a number of people were not happy, as I would not have been, as I'm sure none of you would have been. Well, guess what? They sued them. They sued the company, they sued the airport, and they sued everyone that complained against them. Eventually, they lost, but once again, that's beside the point. The purpose is intimidation, is to make you fear their action. That is really the purpose of this type of behavior. Muslim women in Michigan and in Massachusetts demanded and obtained that the gym they attended set up a separate practice room and time for women only. So if it's only a separate room, I don't have a problem with it. Fine, we can be accommodating. But here's what happened in a number of them. Sorry, the gym is closed, dude, because the Muslim women have their time now. Said, excuse me, I have a busy life. I had 1 hour allocated to doing my gym, and I can't do it because there were Muslim women in there. What world are we living in? That is not acceptable. So anytime you see one of these examples prop up, stand up and collect signatures and demonstrate. I mean, otherwise, this is creeping Sharia. It's called creeping Islamization. So, a very interesting development lately in this country. 7 states so far have adopted a law that says that judges are barred from considering any rule coming from Sharia law. Otherwise, you have what is happening in Europe all the time, where you have clueless judges who are saying, oh, we have to take into consideration their culture, where they were educated, their religious system. So we're going to include their practice, their family law in particular. So for women, even though it's illegal, and they accommodate them, and they accommodate them, and they accommodate them. Well, this is, I think, a very American way to react, and a good one. And I think it would be a really, really good thing to do for a political platform to demand that we do the same thing here in California. It's going to be a big fight. There's no question about it. But I think it would be a really good thing to prevent any foreign law system from impacting domestic law. Bear in mind, however, that it's already the case. International law has a big impact on our lives. You may not be aware of it, but we are bound by all the conventions of international law that the world community is bound by. And it is considered in the US as the law of the land. International law is the law of the land. And the judges, in a number of cases, have had to take into account the fact that international law has an impact on a number of cases. But this is a religious political system based law. There's no room for that here. Absolutely not. Not in our judicial system. And, oh, they overturned it? Already? Oh, I'll double check on that. Thank you. I didn't know that. North Carolina is the one that just adopted it last week. But 7 out of 50, that's still a lot of states that need to go that route. If you can hold your questions, I'll finish and I'll be right there. A comment?
I don't know if people are aware of it, but there's a lot of airport restrooms throughout the country.
Correct.
And Canada that are accommodating Muslims.
That's another very good example. Thank you for adding that. Restrooms and toilets are being accommodated for Muslims. Why? Because their religious obligations are that they have to wash their feet 5 times a day. And people are getting tired of having them put their feet into the sink in front of everybody. So they're saying, oh, we're gonna give you a special kind of, and I'm saying, do it the old way. You bring a bottle of water, you go over the toilet, and you wash your feet that way. There's no reason why we should build taxpayer special toilets for their religious duties. It's not even hygiene duties, it's religious. Now, I'm going to conclude now with this, the heart of the matter. I thought it was important to give you all these elements because you have to understand where now we are and why there is such a dangerous pressure on us today. There is an organization which was created in 1969 called the OIC. It called itself the Organization of Islamic Countries for the longest time. And recently, I'm not sure about why, they started to change their name and they call themselves the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They have never achieved anything constructive. They're just a purely political organization that pushes the Islamic agenda, in particular at the UN. So this is where they are. As you can see, all the Middle East, North Africa, a few Eastern Africa. These are, because there are a lot of Muslims in Russia, they are observer status. This is the, which country is this? Congo, Gabon, I think. I'm not really sure. So you have 56 countries that are members. They will tell you, no, we have 57 members. The one that they add, abusively in my opinion, is Palestine. Palestine doesn't exist. So stop mentioning it. But that's the kind of, misrepresentation they're very comfortable with. Yes? All right, in 1990, the OIC adopted the Cairo Declaration of Human Rights. So here we are again. We have one regimen of rules for the entire world, and the Muslims want a separate, different regimen. So they don't like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the one everybody else abides by. So they created their own, called the Cairo Declaration. And what does the Cairo Declaration say? Oh, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is great, but it has to be submitted to Sharia law. Oh, right. They don't seem to see the irony in that statement, which is by submitting it to Sharia law rules, it eviscerates the very concept of human rights. Because under Sharia law, you have nothing but violations of human rights. So we have to really, it's absolutely amazing that even this was allowed to happen. Now, if you want to keep that in their countries, again, I don't have a problem with it. But to bring that here in our country, that is a different story. Next is the heart of the problem we're facing now, right now. Since 1999, the OIC has been repeatedly attempting to, bad English, sorry, to have the UN endorse rules that would criminalize anything deemed defamatory of religion. In effect, preventing any legitimate criticism of Islam or Muslims. If this is not the hallmark of a fascist ideology, I don't know what it is. You have no right to criticize them, and if you dare do it, you will be punished by law. There already are half a dozen outspoken critics of Islam in Europe who have been tried and punished in court by their own country for defaming Islam, for making offensive comments. Well, I don't know about you, but in this country, of course there are limits, but making fun of other people is a national pastime. We do it all the time. We make fun of our president, God knows, and everybody else. Well, if he's a Muslim, you can't make fun of him because you're going to be offended. So we have to really pay attention to this. What is really annoying here is that, once again, if it's their own belief, they can do whatever they want, but they want to impose this via the UN. And our government is in cahoot with them. Hillary Clinton went to these meetings, and she said that she was very pleased with the way the cooperation had been taking place, and it was really nice. And yes, we have to take into account that we don't want to offend other people, never naming Islam. So we are on a very dangerous, slippery slope here. And this should be, we should put a total stop to this and tell them, absolutely not. This is not going to be accepted. We really have a conflict of values here. And here's something that I want to mention that you may use at your own choosing. I like to say that, how do we call ourselves? What type of civilization do we think we are? How do we call ourselves? Yeah, but no. I'm looking for a name attached to civilization. Western? What is Western civilization based on? We call ourselves Judeo-Christian civilization. Keep that in mind. Our values, our Christian values, find their source in Judaism. And so we are together in that respect, and it's a fundamental one. We don't call ourselves an Islamo-Christian civilization, and there is no such thing as a Judeo-Islamic civilization. Why? Because our values and theirs are at total opposite extremes. They have nothing in common with each other. So we have to remember that our values are the Judeo-Christian ones. If they want to come to this country, that's what they are going to have to adjust with too. If they don't like it, there are other places where they can go. I'll finish with a few recommendations. I just watched this DVD, which was created by Emerson. What's his first name? Steve Emerson. Excellent guy who has done tremendous amount of research on Islamic fundamentalism in all the groups in this country. Look him up on the internet, Steve Emerson, and order this DVD on Amazon. It is really illuminating. What I've given you today is just a very brief outline of the whole problem. It explains very well the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood and what their plan is for our country, unless we fight back. Next. There are two books that I recommend, and one in particular. This one is called Getting Through. It's a very user-friendly book. You read it very quickly. It explains to you how you talk to a Muslim. And it tells you where all the traps are, the type of language that they use, the type of concept that they use, and it will make you a very skilled debater with Muslims. I highly recommend that. It's a small book. If you want to go a little deeper, here is a book, and I want to read to you the whole title because it's worth it. How Apostasy and Blasphemy Codes Are Choking Freedom Worldwide. Get it? Silenced. That's what they want us to be. It's a more academic book. It has a lot of articles, but chock full of information with lots of cases of what has been happening around the world and where we are today. So I highly recommend these two books. And finally, a couple of sites that I also highly recommend. Citizen Warrior is a great site that tells you how to interface with Muslims on a daily basis. CSPI Publishing, what does this stand for? I forgot the exact. On the way out, I don't know if there are any left. You will see a little red book that says Sharia for non-Muslims. This is the house, the company that publishes these books. They've done a tremendous job of translating the Quran into easily digestible books, and that will give you a lot of very good information that you can use later. Thank you very much. Center for the Study of Political Islam. Political Islam, not Islam. Political Islam, because that's what it is. That's what is at the heart of the problem that we're facing. Jihad Watch is a great site. It has a lot of information on daily occurrences of creeping Sharia, creeping Islamization. Here's another one, creeping Sharia, WordPress. So if you sign up to this, you won't believe what you get every day. More incidents of abusive behavior by Muslims demanding special treatments and getting it in most cases in all parts of the country. And this one has a lot of very good articles. Sheikh Yermami, I don't really know what it means, but I like what the content is very well documented. And there are other places as well. Let me see, I think I'm almost done. Conclusion. I think it's really important for all of us to understand that it's vital for us, for Western countries, to resist every one of these stealth attempts to Islamicize their societies. If you want to become a Muslim, that's your privilege and that's your choice. Nobody is going to object to that. You can do it. But for you or anybody else to impose your way of living on the rest of us is unacceptable. And we have to stand up to it. It is important for moderate Muslims everywhere to stand up because they have a lot to lose themselves. You can be, if you're a Muslim light and you don't stand up when the extremists are speaking on your behalf, you're going to be at the receiving end if there is a backlash. So you have to really pay attention. You have a lot of stake. As a Muslim or a non-Muslim, we all are in the same boat in this respect. So I'll stop here and I'm open for questions.
My question to you is the same question I give to Gary. How can you trust anyone, no matter what they tell you? And especially since you gave us, what, 8 people?
8 questions. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But as I said, document it. You can really, that's what I do at UCSD. And they know me, and they absolutely hate the fact that I come on campus because I come with my video camera. They have barred me from going into meetings where they have Muslim speakers. That doesn't mean that you can still tape audio in many different ways. Like they're going to stop me. Hello. And I encourage people to do the same thing. If they tell you anywhere, oh no, this is for Muslim only, or you can't videotape, or you can't audio tape, say, go fine. There are apps on your iPhone that you can download and you will tape anything you want. It's very easy to do. It's very important to document what they say, because you're right. In private, they will tell you whatever you want to hear. But if you can get them to answer these questions in public and then tape it and document it, that can be actionable at one point. So it is really important. I really encourage people to document it. Document whatever they do in writing, audio, video. All these videos that we have seen, and you will see a lot more in this movie that are recommended, were taken not officially. They were barred from being filmed. And thank God some people was courageous enough to do it. So I would encourage you to do that. You have to fight with what you have.
There's another form of creeping Islam that has just come about. I don't know how many people know about this, but Dish, cable, and direct, and all of those
Al
have the
Jazeera.
brand Al Jazeera, which to me is nothing but creeping Sharia, a wolf in sheep's clothing to make Muslims, Islam look like, oh, we're just like you. We're
Oh, yeah.
Americans, and we're here to be your friend.
Absolutely.
And I called my Dish satellite as the very next day and complained and said, I don't want this station. I think it's a terrible thing, and I think we should get rid of it. And there are other stations that have done that already.
Yes.
So I encourage people who have direct or Dish or anything else cable, call them and complain to get rid of it.
I would totally agree with that, and I commend you for have taken that step, because that's exactly what we can do individually. We are not powerless. We are not without resources. We are in America, and we have ways to hear our voices heard. We can do it. However, we have to do it, not just complain. So I commend you for that, and I totally agree. Al Jazeera is funded by Qatar. Qatar is a state, an emirate that supports organizations that perform terrorism acts, and Al Jazeera has been an apologist for terrorism for a long time. They support the Palestinians. They're very skewed news, but they're very good because they give an appearance. If you don't know anything about it, you look at them the first time, it looks like very slick, professional news, but you have to be very careful what they tell you. And interestingly enough, there has been a very strong backlash, so much so that AT&T has refused to carry them, which is really encouraging news. But same thing, call your cable company, call your internet company, and tell them you don't want these guys. Absolutely. The more they hear from us, the more they will be inclined not to take them on.
I heard Dearborn, Michigan is Sharia law. Can you comment?
Yes, Dearborn, Michigan is the highest concentration of Muslims in the country. This has been developing for a long time. It was not always like that, but in the last 30 years, it's become practically Sharia area. There have been a number of incidents there. There were some very courageous Christians that went to a Muslim event, and they were attacked. Luckily, someone filmed it. Evidence, again, always take a video with your video camera. Someone videotaped and sued